Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, what's Nirmata? Nothing. What's Nirmata with you? This is The Creator. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like The Creator, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how's your week been?
Oh, you know what? It's pretty good, I have to say. You know, my year started off slow, taking a little time to get things off the ground in 2024. But between the pod restarting and some other big projects, I see things starting to build momentum, so I'm feeling positive.
Excellent. That's great news. We do know our listeners tend to worry about you.
I know. They're so sweet.
The updates aren't always so sunny, but this week it's looking up.
It's looking up. How about you? Anything good?
I'm in the same boat. I'm excited. It was great to get the podcast going again. That put a little pep in my step. The warm response has been very heartwarming and stuff's going well professionally, personally. I'm feeling like 2024 might be my year.
Let's do it. Let's make it our year.
Let's make it our year. Speaking of our year, we're not doing a 2024 movie, but we are doing another 2023 movie.
Yeah.
The Creator.
We're doing kind of an in memoriam to some movies that bombed last year.
Yeah, we were MIA for a big chunk of last year for about 4 months. So we missed covering some of these. And we're actually going to take a month and try to make up some ground. And then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
But we're doing so far last week, this week, bombs that we kind of like, right?
Yeah, we'll get into it a little more in depth later. But The Creator is a movie I'm quite fond of now. Having rewatched it, I hedged my bets at the end of last week's episode and said I might have to eat some words. But yeah, I'm happy to say that no, I don't.
Oh, good.
I still feel strongly in favor of this movie, and I think I'll go back to it quite often in my life.
That's helping our positivity getting into the year.
In keeping with the spirit of positivity, why don't you tell me what you watched this week that you thought the listeners would be interested to hear about?
I watched something real fun that I definitely was waiting for the pod to come back so I could evangelize. A streaming TV show called Blue Eye Samurai came out in November. It's on Netflix. It's an animated TV series set in feudal Japan, and it's just an old-fashioned revenge quest story. It's got a great cast. Maya Erskine, Randall Park, George Takei, a bunch more fun people in it. And here's the thing about Blue Eye Samurai. As you go browsing Netflix and you see different stuff pop up, you're like, what is that? I'm not an anime guy. Not because I'm against it, but I'm just mostly ignorant of the genre. And I almost ignored the show for that reason. I'm like, oh, that's not my genre. I'm not going to get the tropes. I'm not going to enjoy it. Do not make that mistake. This is animated, but it's not anime. It's just a cracking good TV show that's good on a surprising number of levels. Most shows don't hit all the notes. A great story, great characters. Writing overall is really sharp. The visuals are inspiring and make you kind of ooh and ah over the cool animation. And then the action is actually top notch. I made a note to myself while I was watching it. I'm like, I haven't seen a sword fight this good since The Princess Bride. And not because it's a comedy sword fight, but just because the drama and the action unfolds so well on the screen. So a lot to praise about Blue Eye Samurai. It's written by Michael Green, who has some great credits co-writing or creating things like Logan, Blade Runner 2049, the American Gods series on Starz. He wrote it with his wife, Amber Noizumi. Just nothing but good things to say about Blue Eye Samurai. Yeah,
you've been ringing the bell of Blue Eyed Samurai for a while now in our one-on-one chats, and I've been resistant to dive in because, like you, I'm not an anime guy. So I feel like you were pointing your show and tell at me a little bit this week by saying, don't let that deter you.
But like, it was really a note to myself because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like this. And Netflix will like source all these anime shows that just pop up in your feed and like, oh, I guess that's not really for me. I'm not to say anime isn't great, but this is just the kind of movie I would want to see in a cool animated TV show version.
I'm very happy that you found that.
Thank you.
I'm also bringing a TV show for my show and tell this week, but it's one I might have brought before. I can't remember if I've ever brought it to show and tell, but I definitely talked about it quite a bit on the pod.
I feel like we have.
But it's an anthology show, so it's an easy thing to bring back every year, you know, because you're dealing with new characters, new storylines, new settings, even new eras. And I'm talking about Fargo, of course, one of my most favorite shows. I loved season 1. I think season 2 is one of the best seasons of television ever made.
You betcha.
Season 3 is just solid as heck with my boo Carrie Coon.
Oh yeah,
you know, holding it down for all of us. And
is that the Ewan McGregor season?
Yeah, where Ewan McGregor plays the twins with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
I have to go back and do that one too, but now you're going to tell us about the new season.
So season 3 took me a second watch to really appreciate.
Okay,
it wasn't my favorite at first. David Thewlis, who's the big bad of the season was off-putting in a way I couldn't abide at first, but he grew on me in the second watch. Season 4, I never really got into. I tried to. It seemed like it was right up my alley with gang wars and like the mafia in Kansas City. I think the execution was lacking a little bit. I think Chris Rock was miscast. And then when I started hearing about season 5, I was like, oh, set in a more contemporary setting again, bringing us back to season 3. It's got John Hamm, Juno Temple, nice. Jennifer Jason Leigh, Lamorne Morris, our boy Dave Foley, bringing it with an eye patch. Just total heat check moment for Dave Foley as the fantastically named Danish Graves. I would say this is their most upsetting season, most serious season, most kind of disturbing, violent, whatever you want to call it. But it's still got that Fargo sensibility of the Midwest Nice covering up extreme violence and everyone's throwing 100 miles an hour. It's another one, almost like with the David Thewlis character. I thought the Jennifer Jason Leigh character was just badly written and badly acted at first until the layers peel away as the show goes on. And now I'm like fully on board.
Oh, interesting.
And John Hamm just going full rat fucker, just a total heel turn for him. I know he's never really played like fully wholesome characters. Don Draper wasn't a hero. He had some darkness to him for sure. But this guy he's playing, Sheriff Roy Tillman, is just a real fucker. But it's due to wrap up, I think, in 2 more episodes, maybe 1. So if you like Fargo and maybe have sat this one out because you were lukewarm on season 4 or season 3, I would recommend diving back in because I think it's either my second or third favorite season so far. But like seasons 1, 2, and 5 are going to go down as just all-timers for me.
Wow. That's big praise. I know there's big seasons of TV for you. So if this one stacks up, that's impressive.
Yeah. There's other shows I could talk about that I've been watching, like Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. But I always was taught if you don't have anything nice to say, don't cover it on your podcast.
We can move on to other monster-themed things, including the director of this week's movie, who's a monster-themed dude, wouldn't you say?
Gareth Edwards, my dog. He's done 4 movies, and 2 of them feature giant monsters. So yeah, I guess it's safe to say he's a monster guy. But he's becoming one of my favorite like visual directors.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's always working with the best of scripts or handles like interpersonal dynamics so well, but god damn it, like for a wide shot of some alien technology blowing shit up, like you can't do better than Gareth Edwards. He does scale on a degree that like no other filmmaker is touching right now. Even our boy Denis, I would say, is second to Edwards in scale.
Really? There's a lot of beautiful images in this movie.
And if you don't believe me, do me a favor and go watch the first trailer for 2014's Godzilla, the Halo jump scene where all the paratroopers jump out of a plane into San Francisco that's already been destroyed by Godzilla.
Oh.
And it's some of the most beautiful filmmaking ever. And Rogue One, I'm up on my soapbox firmly. There were so many good shots of Star Destroyers hovering over planets that I'd never really experienced before. Like Star Destroyers, you always could tell they were big in Star Wars movies, but like we didn't have a lot to compare them to except other ships that were also of indeterminate sizes.
Yeah.
And he's just so good at putting something you can compare it to on the screen. And so you're like, holy shit, he really understands that.
Yeah, he gets to thrill you with giant things coming at you in the distance. We'll talk about when that happens in this movie. And there's just picture postcard moments. You're like, wait a minute, the director just stops to make a postcard out of this beautiful scene of a river delta somewhere in Southeast Asia. And you're like, but I don't blame him because it looks incredible. And I just want to stare at it for a minute.
Yeah, he filmed this movie in a super interesting way, mostly as a cost-cutting measure, but I feel like it really helped with that natural beauty of the landscape as well. And would you like me to explain what he did a little bit and also talk about the making of the movie?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. Gareth Edwards does sci-fi. Sometimes it's big, like Rogue One or Godzilla, and sometimes it's small, like Monsters. But the man's gonna do some sci-fi. Following Edwards' removal from Rogue One, where Tony Gilroy took over and did extensive reshoots, he took his time finding his next project. Whatever tumultuousness there was surrounding Rogue One didn't necessarily seem to put any stink on Edwards, as this kind of directorial flip-flopping became commonplace in the Star Wars universe.
The flip-flop is strong with this one.
And Rogue One was still a hit, and also really good. So when Edwards signed with New Regency to write and direct an original, non-IP-based sci-fi project, fans took notice. Edwards' first move was location scouting, going to faraway locales like Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan, Indonesia, Thailand, and Nepal. He settled on Thailand as the main location for the film and began working on the script, then titled True Love. The movie was to be an examination of the relationship between humans and artificial intelligence, certainly not a new concept for a sci-fi movie, but a uniquely timely one given the current state of the world.
It's a good thing robots will never replace podcasters.
John David Washington was cast in May 2021, and Gemma Chan, Danny McBride, and Benedict Wong entered negotiations shortly after. McBride and Wong would both sign on and then have to withdraw for scheduling conflicts, being replaced by Sturgill Simpson and Ken Watanabe, respectively. Allison Janney and Mark Menchaca joined soon after. With a budget of only $80 million, principal photography began in Thailand on January 17, 2022. They sent small crews to film in nearly 100 locations around the world, trying to utilize locations that already had some of the elements they were hoping to include in the movie. Visual effects were then layered into the images only once the film's edit had been finalized. This reduced waste, as special effects weren't applied to scenes that wouldn't be included in the movie, and also reduced the overall cost of the special effects. Edwards credited this novel method with being able to keep the film's budget reasonable, estimating that shooting it the old-fashioned way would have cost about $300 million.
Also known as an old-fashioned goddamn fortune.
Filming finished on May 30th, 2022. Hans Zimmer was announced as the composer for the film's score on July 17th, 2023, only about 2 months before the film's release date of September 29th, 2023. Due to the ongoing SAG-AFTRA strike, the cast were not available to do press or marketing for the film and did not attend the movie's premiere. This may have impacted the movie's commercial outlook, as it debuted in third place with only $14.1 million its opening weekend, falling short of expectations. But critics mostly liked the movie, especially the cinematography, world building, and direction, but did have some qualms with the movie's screenplay and some of the themes. It would go on to make just $40.8 million in the US and Canada, and $104 million total worldwide. Not nearly enough to recoup its budget, but its strong reputation and topical plot gives it a chance of finding a strong audience in the future.
Hopefully not in the distant future like a movie is set in, but
2065?
Yeah, maybe in the next couple of years they'll make some of that back. It's a shame that he worked so hard to bring in a beautiful movie on what's genuinely a low budget for the kind of ambitious sci-fi epic that this is, and he's still he couldn't make it back. He did everything right.
He did everything right. I think the SAG strike definitely hurt him.
Yeah.
But it's also not like there's huge movie stars in this movie that would have been out on the red carpet doing press and bringing audience members in. There's a lot of good actors in this movie, but not necessarily the names you need to bring in theater goers.
That's true. Yeah. John David Washington is cool, but he's not going and getting a lot of buzz on his own.
Yeah. He can't sell a movie yet. Maybe one day. But I remember texting you from the theater right when this movie finished. And I was like, there's no way this thing didn't cost more than $200 million. It's going to be the biggest bomb of all time. Because I was sitting in a mostly empty IMAX theater opening weekend, having just watched a movie that blew my dick off. And there was 4 other people in the whole theater. And I'm like, fuck, this movie's going to be a disaster. But I love it. And then it wasn't quite as bad as all that, because we found out that he came up with this. I don't know if it's a new method. I honestly don't know if other directors have utilized this approach before, but the movie looks fucking fantastic. It's a new way to make big budget sci-fi.
It seems smart. And you're right. You can believe that what you're seeing on screen is actually better for that reason, because it's location first. The priority was on the quality of the actual scenery and the visual quality of the shots that were taken. And then, yes, there's some high-tech towers composited in the background, but it's still a beautiful shot either way. And somehow I feel like that comes through.
Yeah, doing it the way he did it makes it feel like a slightly futuristic version of our world, as opposed to a movie like, I don't know, let's say iRobot, where they shot it with all this green screen and CGI, and it just feels like a sterile, generic sci-fi world.
Nobody really lives there.
This feels like Earth. It feels like Thailand. Just it's been ruined by war and time and everything. And feels like Earth.
If anything, my little nitpicky brain wanted to say this world feels too lived in because it's not that far in the future. I'm like, how is it that all the robots and this incredible construction feels really lived in and old when it's only 2065? I would think they would be building the first stuff that looks like this maybe by that time. But that's maybe a silly thing to nitpick about.
No, I think the movie actually addresses that in a subtle way that you actually called out in the synopsis, because the movie starts with this kind of old-timey, very reminiscent of the Fallout video games, or a kind of a old-timey TV broadcast talking about AI in the future that feels like it's out of the 50s or 60s. So maybe in this world, they had a head start of, 50 or 60 years. So they're 100 years out from the invention of AI, not 40.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. I thought they just made some weird choices because they thought that would look cool in newsreel footage that we would recognize as what are robots doing in the middle of the civil rights movement? But that kind of is the lore of this world, that AI got started way earlier.
Yeah, because people in that newsreel are still talking see, come on down, check out the new AI machines. They're swell. And people don't talk like that anymore.
No, AI flappers kind of threw me there. But no, it starts off like the first robots, and it's really old time looking footage, like it's the 50s or the 60s. And then they show AI integrated in society, and there's little cues in the look of the footage and the context that tells you like now they're in the 80s or 90s, but they're definitely not in the 2020s even.
There was a robot wearing Jenkos at one point.
Yeah.
So you were like, oh, it's got to be in the 90s. Had a wallet chain. It was wild. No, but yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of care and world building in this movie that maybe he should have put some of that care into the love story at the center of the movie. I don't know. But that's neither here nor there. He succeeded in a lot of ways and he failed in very few. I dig this movie. I think it has the potential to be like the Blade Runner of this generation, because don't forget, Blade Runner was crapped on when it came out too. Not this movie was crapped on. It was mostly liked by everyone who saw it. It just wasn't seen by enough people.
We'll see. I've been known to point out little things that I had qualms with in the story and some of the other decisions.
Ian and his motherfucking qualms. I swear to God.
Show me the qualm, they say in Hollywood, and I shall do that.
They don't say that.
But I don't know. It's up to us and the listeners to decide all the stuff I might nitpick about. Does that really matter? Does that have anything to do with whether the movie succeeded or failed at the box office? And I'm not sure that it did.
Yeah, it's a movie, in my opinion, that even when maybe the narrative isn't as strong as it could have been, the visuals, the music, everything is so stirring and so epic in scale that you still feel the feelings it wants you to feel.
It goes a long way to paper over any holes. In some ways, it's a pretty routine action movie script. Some of the plot points and the way that the characters develop and the story develops, I'm like, this is some bone stock shit. Like, they could have been a little more creative about this or that. But then they just execute it so beautifully that you're like, never mind, I'm just staring slack-jawed at the screen.
Do you think you would have felt that way if The Mandalorian had not existed before this movie? Because it's got some Mandalorian vibes for sure.
Interesting. I didn't think of that. I didn't spend a lot of time with The Mandalorian.
You know, there's a bit of a misdirection in this movie where they're talking about the weapon. You got to destroy this weapon. And then it turns out to be a little girl. In The Mandalorian, they're like, you have to kill this 50-year-old creature that's super powerful and could upend the balance of power in the galaxy. And then it turns out to be Baby Yoda.
It's a widow baby.
It's a widow baby. And then the movie and The Mandalorian both do this kind of reverse lone wolf and cub, where like the little guy that needs rescuing is actually the powerful one that ends up getting them out of trouble all the time. And
That's true.
The hero is helpless in a lot of the situations they find themselves in.
I got to admit, I didn't see all those parallels, but they're good observations.
And so I wonder if that took a little bit of the shine off of it for some audience members, but not this guy, because this movie's way better than The Mandalorian.
It's good. Don't let me poop on it. Shall we dive in and start?
I would never let you poop on it. Why would you even do that? Yeah, let's go over the plot, such as it is.
All right, where do I start? The year is 2065. In this future, humanity has developed artificially intelligent humanoid robots called simulants. But 15 years ago, an AI-controlled nuclear warhead was detonated in Los Angeles, killing millions. The Republic of New Asia continues to integrate robots into their society, but America, they say they'll never stop hunting them down, which they do with the aid of an enormous flying battle station called Nomad. Meanwhile, after losing an arm and a leg in the LA explosion, Army Sergeant Joshua Taylor, played by John David Washington, worked undercover in Asia in the search for the AI's mysterious designer called Nirmata. But he quit 5 years ago after an American raid blew his cover and killed his contact Maya, played by Gemma Chan, who also happened to be his wife and was pregnant with his child. Now, the Army has come back to recruit Taylor again. They say Nirmata is building a superweapon called Alpha O that can destroy Nomad and win the war for AI. But Taylor won't help them until they reveal that Maya is actually still alive. So Taylor agrees to join their raid and guide them through Nirmata's lab, and they promise to let him bring his wife out alive. The raid turns violent, and both the assault team and the lab are blown up, but Taylor survives. And he finds the secret weapon Alpha O. But Nirmata's superweapon turns out to be a young simulant girl. Not as surprising because we already told everyone that, but
womp womp.
It's a big reveal there at the end of the first act. There's all this work, reveal the weapon. It's in a giant sealed chamber, and it's a little girl, and she's watching her cartoons on the TV.
Little bald baby named Alfie. She's real cute.
Little toon can.
Watching TV, eating cereal.
Yeah. I don't know what she was doing. I actually felt like they laid it on a little too thick in the reveal of her. Like there's some reason that they're keeping their secret weapon in this big sealed chamber, this beautiful technological underground bunker compound. And you expect to see something plugged in with wires and lights flashing. And then there's like this hokey old-timey armchair, and the cartoons she's watching are like black and white. Like they painted with a very heavy brush to illustrate the irony of how much this is not a glowing beeping missile. This is a little child.
But we're starting at the end of the first act here. So let's go back a little bit and talk about the world of this movie. You brought out some comparisons. You said Blade Runner. I don't see that as much as you do necessarily, but then then you said District 9. And I think that's a great comparison.
Yeah, each of them for different reasons. The District 9, because District 9 was a movie that had that very gritty, grounded sense of place and these very naturalistic creatures running through it. And that's something that this movie does really well.
Yeah. What was it about the movie that reminded you of Blade Runner?
Mostly in the city settings. Like when they get to the city, it's got what's now the stereotype of the futuristic Asian city tropes, right? It's a big city with things flying through the air and tall glowing screens showing this or that, and police drones flying up next to skyscrapers. It just literally has a lot of the same material that's kind of Blade Runner-y. It doesn't have the same dark film noir mood as Blade Runner, but it has the glowing neon pink and blue parts.
Not to mention, it's pretty hard to overlook replicant, simulant, like this whole
That's
question
true.
about what is a human and who should have rights and all this. That's at the heart of both movies. They tend to cover a lot of the same ground as far as that's concerned.
That's true. So there's a mix of when we say robots and simulants, some of these robots have, robot heads and they're totally mechanical looking. And some of them are simulants that have human faces, but when you turn to the side, their necks and ears are some exposed machinery. And there's something about the way they all look on screen and the way they move that has that kind of magic that reminded me that Star Wars once used to give me that hit, that thrill of like, oh, it's a walking, talking robot. And Star Wars lost that. They have plenty of really sophisticated CGI creatures and droids now, but none of them have that kind of sparkle that somehow this movie manages to recapture.
Yeah, you're right. And that's pretty impressive that they were able to capture that for almost all the simulants that we get to know. They don't all move exactly the same as each other, but they move different from humans.
It's something about the way they all move and the way they're naturalistically integrated into scenes, right? They don't like frame the scene around, put the robot in the middle and then we'll paste the CGI in there. They're like very deeply integrated. It just feels very natural. And I'm like, this is what it would look like if there were robots walking among us.
And I do love the detail that these simulant soldiers are using AK-47s. Like, that's just a nice little world building detail because, 2065, the AK-47 is like a famously durable gun. It's used all over the world for that reason. It's cheap, easy to get, never breaks. And so, of course, 40 years from now, like the most logical beings, these AI soldiers would be like, we're going to use these. They still work.
The look and feel of all the weapons and the way they shoot and stuff feels really real and grounded.
And then we got Nomad, which I was a little underwhelmed by Nomad when you just see it from the sky. Like when, when it's up in the sky. At the climax of the movie, I would say it's more impressive visually. But in these parts, I was just like bummed when it showed up because it meant there was just going to be big explosions and people were going to die and we weren't going to get those kind of human moments. It was like, all right, now it's time for a big action scene because Nomad's here.
So we talked about how good Gareth Edwards is at scale. I have a nit to pick about Nomad. Where is it flying? Is it in space or is it just up where an airplane is? Because there's a lot.
Or is it in that weird in between area? Like that guy. Remember that guy who jumped he skydove from space for Red Bull or something like 10 years ago?
But it was like out of a balloon or something.
He was kind of in space.
Yeah, just barely in space.
Yeah, he was kind of in space, but kind of not. I got the feeling it was like in that in between.
I believe that. And there's definitely scenes like when they eventually fly up to it, it feels like it's in that sort of like low orbit space territory in between the upper atmosphere. And it's a weird nitpick, but when things are that far, like even big things, jumbo jets,
it would have to be so fucking big to be like that visible from that far
to fill the
up.
sky. Yeah. Like we know the International Space Station is huge and like you can see it as a dot in the sky if you know where to look, but you can't like really make it out without a telescope. And so like how big would this thing have to be to actually be in space and also fill half the sky as it comes to bomb you? So I'm like, maybe.
Well, I guess it might not be like a plot hole or anything. It could just be like the thing moves in and out of orbit. If it's time to attack, it comes down. I think that's probably my headcanon. I don't know if the movie ever really explains it, but I'll say it's way up there when it's just chilling. And then when it's time to bomb some shit, it
gets in your face a little bit.
Gets down and dirty. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. That's kind of where I ended up being. Because like it didn't take me out of the movie, but it did make me feel like, oh, is the scale of this thing changing? Is the position of it changing? Still a good element. The way it puts you in its glowing blue crosshairs before it kills you. That's fun to have something at this distance and when you see it targeting you and then you know you're done for.
Yeah. So Nomad, mixed bag. Let's call it a mixed bag for the big bad of the movie, because there's really not a lot of villains in this movie. I guess Nomad is the villain, or just bureaucracy.
And the two army officers, the colonel and her boss, the general. We'll get to them. They're fun. They're good parts of the movie.
Let's talk about John David Washington as Sergeant Joshua Taylor. What'd you make of him in this role?
I wasn't sure what to make of him. I find him just generally likable, so I come in with a default positive feeling. I feel like maybe he suffered some from the holes in the script because they had to get through some motivation moments that like, oh, that was weird, and he was just acting weird, but he's also, especially for the first half of the movie, he's playing a jaded, fucked up guy. So, like, maybe he's good, or maybe his natural limits of his acting kind of work for playing an emotionally burned out guy.
I don't know, because I would say if you've only seen him in like this and Tenet, then that holds water. But seeing him in Black Klansman, I think he has really good range. He's just downplaying it in this movie. But then at times he does turn it on. He could be very funny in this movie. And you do feel like the love story of this movie to me is not between Maya and Taylor. It's between Alfie and Taylor. Like,
yes.
It's a father-daughter dynamic more so than anything else. Because their connection is very real to me.
And they're cute together. Yeah, I don't really have anything bad to say about him. I think you're right. That's the important relationship for him. And I like all that stuff.
And he sounds just like his dad sometimes.
Yeah.
Like there are a few lines, especially when he gets shouty, that if you close your eyes, it's Denzel.
It's fun.
I'd like to see them in a movie. I feel like Denzel is the type of dude who wouldn't want to do that. Like he wants his kids to make it on their own to some degree, but I'd like to see them act together.
At some point, it seems like even if he feels strongly about that, it should be okay to come around and be like, okay, now we're going to do some stuff. Wait, didn't they? I feel like there's something in John David's filmography where he did show up early on. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. He was in Devil in a Blue Dress and Malcolm X when he was like a kid.
Oh, okay. That's what I saw.
But he's not recognizable as an adult actor now.
Yeah.
But there is some Washington family projects in the pipeline that we'll talk about later, but they don't necessarily involve Denzel yet.
Oh, okay.
Stay tuned for the end of the episode. And now let's talk about Colonel Howell and General Andrews, played by Ralph Ineson and Allison Janney. I'm with you on that one. I liked them. I thought that was our boy Clancy for a second because he's got the gravelly voice, and you want a big military bad guy, Clancy Brown, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, that would be pretty much a straight one-for-one swap here.
But Ralph Ineson does great too. He's a little creepy, untrustworthy. He's always wearing these dark glasses and his hat real low.
They gave him these weird glasses. They're like oversized prescription glasses. He's like the weirdo serial killer of army generals.
But like, he never ends up doing anything that's too out of pocket, Like you think he's going to be this kind of big bad megalomaniac, but he mostly just does what you'd expect like a military guy to do. He doesn't seem overly vindictive or cruel. He's just pragmatic.
That's true. The American forces and the American military strategy, as it's laid out in this movie, is revealed to be misguided because they find out later that, hey, you know what, the AI wasn't really responsible for that attack on LA. That was a programming error by humans. So you go, okay, they're in the wrong. But other than that, they're acting like normal army people would. They're pursuing their targets. And when people get at cross purposes with U.S. goals, they attack them. Neither of them turns into an actual evil villain who does sadistic or cruel or immoral things out of their own sense of evil.
Right. And even Taylor, we see him when he's working his job cleaning up the bomb site in LA. His coworker gets freaked out by a simulant that's repeating its last words or whatever. And he just keeps going, it's just programming. And then when he becomes attached to Alfie, the other soldiers aren't like, they're not treating him like a traitor. I feel like it's got to be a phenomenon by that point where like you go native and switch over to being sympathetic to them because they're so convincing. But he's like, hey man, it's just programming. But that's another thing where they think they're right, but they're wrong. But they're not really acting with malice. If you believe it's just programming, then what they're doing isn't really evil.
Yeah, they're not hateful. The movie isn't trying to portray it as pure bigotry and hatred towards the other. It's just
got out of hand, which is a novel approach. And it puts an interesting moral tint to the end of the movie where probably tens of thousands of people die at Alfie's hand. Spoiler alert. And it's played as a triumph, but like they were just doing like, they thought they were just...
Oh, you think she killed that many people inside of Nomad when she brought it down?
I mean, that's a huge fucking space station, right? And they didn't have time to evacuate them all, or they got a bunch of them out, I guess.
They made a nod to the idea that you could feel okay because you saw the lab coat scientists jumping in escape pods and going like, yeah, the death tolls are hand waved over there. I know what you mean.
Because it would be like, I would hearken it to, remember Toy Story, the first Toy Story?
Okay.
And Sid, the creepy neighbor kid who like tortures the toys. They act like he's the most evil motherfucker of all time for doing that, but he doesn't know the toys are alive.
That's true.
That's how I feel about the employees on Nomad. Like they don't know the toys are alive. You're just going to blow them up.
I guess the argument for what makes the American aggressors immoral is they can see that these villages that they're attacking are full of humans too, right? So they're killing the human sympathizers along with the AI they're nominally after.
And we do get some good exposition along those lines in these opening parts of the raid where they come across an innocent village and terrorize the inhabitants to get information out of them, which you liken to Platoon, which I think is a pretty good comparison. I know Edward cited Apocalypse Now as an influence too, so I could see that he definitely had that Vietnam sensibility going on there.
Yeah, a lot of it does seem to be like heavily Vietnam War coded, including just dressing a lot of the partisans in black. That sort of evokes, at least my understanding of Viet Cong along. And then just, the scenarios are coming into these tropical villages and just being really, really bad. But yeah, they give the worst sort of evil stuff to a couple over the top soldiers, right? There's not the colonel.
The Mark Menchaca guy.
The Menchaca guy, yeah.
And the guy, when Taylor's like, these work by facial recognition, he's like, guess I just need a face. And he goes to cut the face off a dead body. I don't know if that was a dead simulant or a dead person.
That's a good question. The lines definitely are blurring when they're on attack. I mean, those are like tried and true tropes. You have a couple of the soldiers who are, their sadism comes out when the war scenario allows that too.
True to life in that way. All right, so that's about it for the first act. Was there anything we missed, or should I go on to the middle?
Yeah, why don't we hear what happened next?
All right. In the morning, Taylor is contacted by the raid leader, Colonel Howell, played by Allison Janney, who also survived the attack. She orders him to kill the little girl, but he can't do it. And when Taylor realizes the girl knows his wife, he takes her with him as they flee both the local cops and the surviving U.S. soldiers. Taylor bonds with the girl, played by Madeleine Yuna Voyles, who he names Alfie, and he learns that Alfie has the power to control electronic devices with her mind. With Alfie's help to get them out of trouble, the pair make their way to the provincial capital to meet Taylor's friend and former commanding officer Drew, played by Sturgill Simpson, who now works in a robot factory. They escape an attack by police and follow a tracker looking for Maya. They're attacked and captured by the AI rebel faction, and Drew dies, but first he reveals a secret to Taylor. The AI mastermind, Nirmata, isn't Maya's father, but Maya herself.
Did everyone see that coming? Was that really a big reveal? I couldn't remember by the time I revisited this movie whether that was shocking or like, yeah, duh, your wife is the big cheese.
I wasn't surprised when the reveal came, but I also wasn't mad at it. It felt logical. Like, why would we be doing all this build up for her dad, who we never once saw?
That's true.
It just doesn't make sense. It's so much cleaner to just have it be her.
Just from surface movie logic, you're like, we know who's cast in this movie, and it's Gemma Chan, and she must be important.
Exactly. Unless they were trying to say Ralph Ineson was her dad and also a double agent, then I don't see what purpose it would serve to just have this nameless, faceless character. But we got to talk about the term Nirmata.
Yes.
It is walking up dangerously close to Pilsen levels of overuse, if you remember our Captive State episode.
Nirmata, that, everyone loves to say it.
Ken Watanabe must say it like 55 times minimum in this movie. That's most of his dialogue.
I wonder if that's a thing, the screenwriters, or maybe something that Gareth Edwards did. I feel like they went heavy on the name dropping, and maybe that's a thing when you do a complex sci-fi story. You're like, we better say the names out loud a bunch of times so that they sink in. Otherwise, people will get lost. But yeah, Nirmata is a lot. Because I noticed it when we meet Drew, who's the old commanding officer of Sergeant Taylor, the hero. And I'm calling him Taylor through most of this thing because we meet him in this military environment. We hear him called Taylor a lot. Well, Drew calls him Josh because he was his buddy. He was not just his commanding officer. And Sturgill Simpson has to say Josh like 1,000 times. He's in the movie for like 12 minutes. He says Josh at the beginning and end of every sentence, and it got distracting.
Yeah, and Sturgill Simpson's already like punching above his weight class being in this movie with these actors. You were not a fan of his acting, were you?
I was like, he's a likable guy. I see why he gets cast in movies if you don't know, and I didn't really know about him. He's a country music singer and a very successful one.
Pretty good one too. He's not like the radio country so much. He's more like on the Jason Isbell wavelength.
Yeah, he's that kind of dude. And he's the kind of guy who, like, you get the impression he's the kind of guy that charms everyone he meets. And that's why he makes his move into Hollywood. And he's been picking up more and more acting roles. And he's decent on screen. But like I saw when I read about him in his bio, he has this quote where he says he's not an actor. And I'm like, oh, I believe that.
I mean, that was supposed to be Danny McBride.
Now that would be weird.
I don't know if that works either. Riddle me this, Ian.
Okay.
Why is it not Shea Wiggum?
Shea Wiggum would have knocked it out of the park, of course.
This is a Shea Wiggum-ass role if I've ever fucking seen one.
It is.
And it should have been Shea.
Shea was probably not available.
What do you think Shea Wiggum's quote is?
I wonder.
You think it's $1 million? It's not $1 million. They probably could have got away with paying him like $600,000 for this role, and he would have crushed it.
I hope he's making good money.
I mean, he's in everything. He's going for quantity, but also quality because he fucking rules. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that this role would have been 10 times better if Shea Wiggum played it.
Sturgill Simpson, he gets it across. He gets through his short time in this movie without fucking anything up too bad, but it's not great. And you mentioned Danny McBride. I could see Danny McBride trying to play a role like this totally straight, but could he really pull that off? He would have made it much more humorous, I think.
Inherently, you just see him and start laughing.
He can't help but just do an eyebrow and burnish a line with a wisecracking tone, and it becomes loaded and funny. And I had trouble. I didn't know what to laugh at in this movie. There were times when the movie was clearly being funny on purpose, and I wasn't quite ready to laugh because the rest of the movie is so sober and somber. Did you experience any of that?
And the humor is compartmentalized to the middle section of the movie. There's almost none in the first section, and there's almost none in the third section. It's all in the middle, you know, which makes it feel a little more strange, a little more out of place because like they don't pick up those threads and carry them. They just throw some jokes in there when we're just moving from point A to point B because what else are we going to do? But then the movie drops all humor, and rightfully so. There's nothing funny about the end of this movie or the beginning for that matter, but
it's serious at the start. Yeah. And then
there's 20 minutes where there's a joke a minute and then nothing else.
The first scenes where it's obviously ripe for humor when you have the tough guy soldier and now he's stuck with the little girl and he has to figure out how to get her, motivate her to do stuff. And he's trying to coax her into the truck. And those are inherently funny. Those are not just like jokes written into the script. Those are like the whole setup has some inherent irony and humor in it. But I wasn't sure whether that was supposed to be funny. And then in the middle of that scene, they did a straight up gag where the cops throw a grenade into the garage as he's trying to get her to jump in the truck so they can peel out of there. And the dog takes it outside and he drops it at the feet of the cops and they go, whoa. And then they all blow up and then they wobble around with their heads off. It gets cartoony.
The Benny Hill theme starts playing. It was crazy.
It was weird.
That whole sequence felt out of place. There are jokes that I thought worked, and they come from like Alfie's lack of understanding of social norms. Like when she's, we're playing a game called Keep Joshua Out of Fucking Jail. That was a funny joke that made sense in the context of the movie. But like the kind of wacky, zany physical comedy that you're describing did feel strange.
That felt a little shoehorned. As much as I love a cool sci-fi movie with cool robots and special effects going the action comedy route, this movie probably didn't need to go that route.
I'm just going to say it. That was some Phantom Menace shit. Some real Phantom Menace nonsense. All right.
Back to serious sci-fi shit. This one U.S. soldier dies from his wounds and Taylor leaves him behind. And when the colonel catches up to him, they do something fucking really cool. She scans his brain and then plugs it into this dead simulant guy. And they're like, you got 30 seconds. And all of a sudden the guy's alive again for 30 seconds. So she can question him.
And he's freaking out. He wants to talk to his wife. He's having to deal with the realization that he's dead.
He sees himself next to himself.
And she's just trying to ask him questions. This is the second movie in 2 weeks where people have had to resurrect dead people to ask them questions.
Yeah, a very different tone. It was very funny in Dungeons & Dragons. It was hilarious and it was creepy. I'm like, okay, that's where this movie's like, it might be losing you for a second and then it does some really cool sci-fi genre shit that you're like, okay, I'm back on board.
Yeah.
It's really creepy and cool because it works in the context. Like it's really stretching it to think that you can put a little halo over somebody's head and scan their entire personality and then plug it on a little USB drive into a robot. But you go with it because it's constructed so well and it plays out so intensely.
I think that scene also did a little bit of heavy lifting for the climax of the movie where we, spoiler alert, meet AI Maya, because now we know the technology exists to take someone's entire being and transfer them into a simulant.
And that's good filmmaking and great screenwriting when you can do something that is actually a setup that you need for an ending that you want to do later, but is also a really clever way to move this genre story forward. That this is a chase story. The bad guys are hot on his trail and he thinks he's lost them and they pull out some improbable sci-fi shit to get back on his trail.
Do you want to talk about the apartment raid a little bit? With do you remember the name of Drew's girlfriend?
No.
The AI. She was like charming and funny.
Yeah.
It was nice to see him going because he's the one who warns Josh don't go native when he's got to go marry Maya. And then he, of course, that was like a fun flip of their dynamic is that now he's the one who's either married or dating an AI.
And working in a robot factory.
Live above this robot factory. And she's tasked with babysitting Alfie. Not that Alfie needs much babysitting because she can literally do almost anything.
She's the chosen one.
But the cavalry is coming.
In a cool way. This was another one where I'm like, it looks and feels super cool. They got into this situation that's one of those, oh my God, impossible moments in an action movie. An entire SWAT team busts into this apartment and surrounds the kid and they've all got their guns out. And you're like, how are they going to get out of this? And they're like, oh, actually, Sergeant Taylor is a badass super action hero and he'll just shoot all 12 of them, take out an entire squadron of SWAT robot cops single-handedly. And I'm like, I didn't think we were in that movie. I didn't think that's the kind of hero he was, but conveniently he was that hero for a minute.
Let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
First off, he's got a robot arm, so he probably doesn't have to aim. Probably does it for him. Two, we do get some backstory that he was like a legit kind of war hero type dude.
Okay.
Or at least a highly trained soldier. You see him with this battalion that seems to be pretty badass.
We know that he was the undercover operative in this massively, the most important raid for the U.S. at the time, right? They're going after public enemy number one. So yeah, he must have been somebody badass. So it's almost like you're saying could play as a reveal that like this guy who seems like he's just scraping by on the sidelines is actually super capable. It just caught me by surprise, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember now because I'm pretty sure it's his right arm that's missing and that's the arm he's shooting with.
That's a good point.
There's got to be some way to explain that away as you don't really have, the arm does a lot of the work for you.
Yeah.
There's no recoil probably that bothers him or things like that just make him a little more effective.
That's true. I never thought of that. But yeah, that alone, having a super robot arm could make you into a superhero.
Gareth Edwards, if you want to send me a check check for just
digging out of holes,
filling in any plot holes in your movie. I'll be happy to receive it.
You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
You're winning me over with this. We have episodes like this sometimes where we come at it from a different point of view and we bring each other towards the center.
Yeah, that's where we're at. Not to say you didn't like this movie, but you have qualms. Ian's always got some qualms.
I need to iron out my qualms.
The Qualmcast. You want to bring it home?
Here we go. Act 3. Let's bring this sucker home. Taylor is now a captive of the AI faction, and Nirmata's lieutenant Haroon, played by Ken Watanabe, is about to kill him. But Alfie intervenes and helps Taylor escape. So then Taylor follows Haroon and Alfie back to the AI faction's home base to try and see Maya one last time. Meanwhile, Nomad is closing in to obliterate them completely, and Alfie's powers are not yet strong enough to disable it from the ground. So Haroon makes a plan to send the girl directly up into the flying battle station. And unfortunately, it's a plan that she's not expected to survive. But just then, the US Army attacks with ground forces, so Haroon and Taylor take Alfie and flee the base. They take her up to Nirmata's remote mountain hideaway, where Taylor learns that Maya has been unconscious in a vegetative state this whole time since the attack 5 years ago. He also learns that Maya had designed Alfie from a scan of her and Taylor's own unborn baby. Since the AI can't bring themselves to take Maya's life, it's on Taylor to tearfully switch off the life support from his wife and Alfie's mom. Then the army attacks, and they capture Taylor and Alfie and bring them back to Los Angeles. But when tasked with shutting Alfie down, Taylor instead fakes her death, and the two escape and commandeer a commercial spaceflight to take them up to Nomad for a final showdown. So while Taylor goes to plant explosives, Alfie races to disarm Nomad's weapon systems before it can launch a massive missile attack on all known remaining AI outposts worldwide. Taylor's bomb works to sabotage Nomad and foil the missiles, but he's trapped on the dying station, and Alfie has to take the last escape pod back to Earth without him. However, Alfie has inserted a copy of Maya's consciousness into a simulant body, and as the space station explodes, Taylor gets to spend his last moments in the embrace of his beloved wife.
All right.
That was a long act.
That was a long act. You covered a lot of ground on that one.
And I shortened so many more plot points to gloss over them.
You hit the important parts, but a lot of that's simplified from what actually goes down because it would just take too long to explain it all.
Alfie goes back and forth between being captured and escaping and going back and leaving again, and attacks are there's a lot of plot in this movie.
And like Haroon and Taylor are at odds, and then they're friends again, and he has to earn their trust back by trying to save Alfie during the attack on the village. There's a lot of work to get done in this section, let's say.
Yeah, I like character work, and it's good. They bring it around. They actually make it work. I like the way the Haroon relationship with Taylor develops from enemies to friends, and
we already got the history between them from the opening of the movie, so it was nice to bring that back.
Yeah.
And Ken Watanabe is just always a welcome presence.
Yeah.
And he's the guy from the 2014 Godzilla.
Oh, okay.
So
that's right.
Him and Edwards have a history of working together. Let them fight was, of course, the famous quote from that movie.
Okay.
He doesn't say it in this movie. He should have said it.
Say the line, Ken. He gives this whole faction gravitas, and he's one of the people that survives to the end to be like the face you put on screen at the end. Like, all right, some good people are still left to carry on with the world.
But how good is he really? Because he was going to sacrifice Alfie.
Was he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was like, Alfie's going to die for sure.
That's true. It was his plan. We got to send the kid up into the battle station, even if she doesn't come back. But I'm sure it was a painful decision for him. It's the right thing.
Taylor figured it out in half an hour, like a way to do it without killing Alfie. So
yeah, these plot points, they needed so many dramatic turns that it's like they go up into Nomad. She disables the missiles with her magic by sitting and meditating, and they stop. And then someone goes, Alfie, it's time to leave. And every time she loses focus, her powers stop working. So the missiles go right back. She didn't actually, was she the one who brought the space station down at all? Or was it just that one bomb that Taylor planted?
Fair question. Yeah. Were you actually asking me, or?
Because you've had good answers for my other items before, but
you've stumped me. You've got me on this one.
It's complex. Yeah. A lot of shit happens when they get to that. Should we talk about anything else that happens before they get to the final spaceship showdown?
Yeah, we have to talk about the whole attack on the village too.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a pretty astounding set piece.
It's great.
Really nice battle. Low to the ground. Like it feels intimate. It's not like a Marvel MCU like CGI fight fest. You actually feel the impact of these bombs and you see the devastation. It doesn't feel like it's minimalizing it.
No, and it starts out, this is one of the areas where you were talking about Gareth Edwards shooting scale. The army brings these giant super tanks and they come at such a distance through the jungle that you just see the tops of trees starting to get knocked over. And that for me was one of those great moments of, oh shit, something big's coming. Like in a kaiju movie where you're like, what is that? And the dread comes and it's real cool and scary when they show up.
Yeah, I really liked the design of the army's weaponry. It felt right for 2065. I could see the leap from where we are now to there. It didn't feel fantastical.
No, those those tanks are like super big and high tech, but they still feel lived in. And interestingly, the army, who seems to have a lot of money, overwhelming weapons, you would think they could just pancake this whole village. It turns sort of hand to hand almost, because they drive this big tank up and then they unleash these dumbass trash can robot suicide bombers who have to run across a bridge with their funny stompy feet to try to blow themselves up behind the AI lines. And they're dumb, but I loved them. I thought that was one of the really cool elements.
The design was really fun. Yeah, they are stupid, but like in a fun way.
They talk dopey because they're like smart robots, but you get the impression that, okay, the army is like, we better not make our robots too smart because that was a problem for us in the past. So they're just like barely smart enough to conduct their mission. And they're just like, pleasure to serve you, Commander. And then they turn and they stomp off down the bridge and they're just like a trash can. But it's also incredibly dark and bleak because they're suicide bomber robots and their job is just to run over to the enemy side and then kill a lot of people.
And we know that the robots do have feelings and hopes and dreams and emotions. But then that's not the only force with unwitting participants, because the villagers got monkeys.
Yes. How did they get a smart monkey?
I don't know. Is that Jack Sparrow's monkey?
This heroic partisan on the AI side does one of those moments. He runs up to the impossibly huge tank and he throws the mine or the bomb and it sticks to the side. And then they shoot him just before he can pull the detonator. And the little monkey picks it up and he's got some intelligence behind his eyes. Like you can see him thinking, I know what to do with this. And he does it.
It's like, these fuckers blew up my favorite tree. I'm going to show them what happens when you fuck around.
He pulls a little trigger and it blows one entire of those mega tanks up just with the little monkey. Oh, I love that monkey.
He's a good monkey. So we also get, like, this is the scene where Taylor fully crosses the point of no return. Like, he can't go back to the human forces now. He shoots one of them to save Alfie on the bridge.
Right. He shoots the mad dog, sadistic guy who has been chasing him ever since the raid.
Shoots him in the leg and tells him back off, and he doesn't. So he kills him dead. And then that's when he regains the trust of Haroon and can reintegrate into the AI society.
I forgot that he had that specific moment where he had to actually take the life of a fellow soldier, which makes it harder for me to square the rest of it when they're like, they just keep bringing him around. And we got a couple beats to get there, but you know, the army kind of wins in the end. They capture him and Alfie and they're like, let's keep this Taylor guy around. I don't know. He's like really useful.
They just keep saying like, you know, Alfie listens to you. We need you to tell her to do this because she'll listen to you. But then he never tells her to do what they say. He keeps fucking it up. On purpose.
He's done nothing but cross them in his whole history with the army. And yet they're like, let's bring that Taylor guy back.
You know what? I think one more time. It's a fucked up thing. They try to force him to kill Alfie.
And you think he is, but he's got a trick up his sleeve.
Did you really think he was? You saw there was like half an hour left.
I didn't know how they were going to get out of it, but there was no clear explanation. You know, that only afterwards, even when they showed the explanation of what he did, he told her, he's like, I'm not turning you off. I'm just putting you on standby.
He said not off standby, which is a callback to, they have made that reference a couple times before in the movie when they're talking about how people die and when he has to unplug Honor to get back into the village.
Okay.
And get Alfie out of there. He says not off, just stand by. So they did set that up, for that line to be important.
Yeah, but it doesn't explain. The army guys saw him shoot her in the face with the gun that they gave him to do it with. Like, how did he stop her from dying? I don't know. It doesn't really matter, does it?
It's Alfie, bro. She can do whatever she wants.
And she's getting more powerful. Like, she definitely, you see her powers growing by the end, which is fun because it's a little payoff for something that you like. You hate to see the real chosen one hero never evolve and become Neo, right? Like, you want there to be a scene where she has
I was about to make that
power.
Yeah, I was about to make that comparison. Like the end of The Matrix when he's stopping the bullets and beating the shit out of Agent Smith. If you didn't have that scene, that movie would feel not nearly as rewarding.
And she doesn't have it quite on that kind of dramatic level, but she does definitely get stronger towards the end and start kicking butt and making things happen.
What'd you think about the scene where he has to shut off Nirmata/Maya?
It was touching, especially because at that point, you know that she's technically Alfie's mom and his wife at the same time, and they're both sitting there crying over having to pull the plug on her life support. That was good. That emotion worked on me.
And anytime Alfie cries, you know, I'm going to cry.
Basically, she's so cute. We didn't even barely talk about her. She hasn't been in anything before this, right?
She's got nothing in production either. This might be a one and done. I don't know, but there's nothing else I could find on her IMDb that she's going to keep acting.
Yeah, to me, she's one of those examples of what movies can do when you have a budget to really go hard on the casting and you just find somebody who has something neat on screen and you just want to see her. I mean, she's adorable, but she pulls you in. And like when she, like you said, when she cries, I cry. I can't help it.
She's dynamic. She's just very watchable on screen. You're like, I want to see what she's going to do. And I did like Colonel Howell's comeuppance at that scene. That was nicely played.
Yeah.
And again, Allison Janney, they took a little extra time and they gave her enough of a backstory where you understand where she's coming from too. There's no cartoon villains in this movie. And I appreciated that.
You understand her motivations. She's not not just to cut out. And I like that they put it on. I guess Haroon shoots her because he has to, because he's trying to save Alfie. And then Alfie tries to save Howl. There's a ticking bomb stuck to Howl's back, and Alfie's like, does her little meditation and it stops ticking. And you're like, oh, how nice. She actually saved her tormentor who's trying to kill her this whole time. And then the soldiers fuck it up. They start shooting at Alfie and they make her.
Yeah, they shoot Alfie and that makes her lose concentration.
Yeah, as soon as she loses concentration, there goes the colonel.
It's a nice way to take the onus off the simulants for killing more humans.
It was the humans' fault in the end.
In the end, it was beauty killed the beast. No, that's not true. That has nothing to do with this movie. It's just a quote from King Kong. All right, Nomad finale. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I like that space shuttles look like planes in 2065. Like it's just, and you have to go to the airport, spaceport, like everything else. Something we both admired about Ad Astra. And I think this movie does a good job too of making it seem mundane and annoying.
It feels real.
That was cool. And then the actual attack itself, like this whole sequence maybe was a little long. Once they land on Nomad and there's just a lot to do.
Yeah.
Like it almost feels like a Resident Evil game. Like, all right, you got to go flip this switch. Then you got to get the ruby. You put the ruby inside the statue. I just felt like they were checking boxes for a little bit here.
Yeah.
And then Alfie kept getting distracted. It was frustrating. It was cute and endearing at other parts of the movie, but now you're like, focus, Alfie.
Stop the missiles, because the visual spectacle of it is great. That whole like missile rack, Taylor's riding the last missile on the rack and they're all like chugging through the thing and she's trying to stop it. And those missiles are going off to kill all the last pockets of AI resistance across the globe. There's a lot at stake and it looks cool. All that I thought was really well executed, but there's a lot of like back and forth between wrangling with the staff, and then the general ends up taking control of a robot that sort of fights Taylor in the end and makes it so that he can't ride the escape pod. There's just there's a lot of plot mechanics to the end sequence.
I specifically wanted to call out that scene when Taylor is like outside the station hanging on the missile. Seeing that in IMAX was mind blowing. Was such a well designed sequence, just from an action movie point of view. Mind blowing how crazy that looks on a big screen.
I bet. Yeah, that's the thing. Like the movie, you got to give it credit, even if you're sensitive to the nitpicks, like I sometimes can be. Like we're talking about this section. Oh, it's getting plot heavy and there's a lot of little mechanical things. But then it just shows you some shit like that. And you're like, oh yeah, it's fucking cool. Do what you need to do.
I personally don't feel like we needed the Maya reunion with Taylor at the end there. But also that romance didn't really work for me for the whole movie. So that could color my feelings about it.
It was kind of a romance made out of a Hollywood trope, which is show a flashback of a couple in slow motion on the beach. And like, now you understand that they are in love. And that's almost all it consisted of. Besides, there was one
They tease
scene,
each other. Look at them tease each other. They're so playful.
They had that one scene at the beginning where they were fun together. And then, bringing them together for a gauzy, surreal reunion as the world, not the world, but the space station explodes around them. I get it. That felt like the part where they were milking the emotion versus the other emotions of actually bringing down the space station, and Alfie's joyous crying face over that. That felt real, and I was fully on board with that part.
And then the final shot is just Alfie crying, smiling. It was great. I was like, all right. Interesting note to end it on, because it's not overwhelmingly a happy ending, for one thing. No. A lot of those missiles landed.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Taylor's dead as fuck, and Alfie's got nobody. She has Haroon, but Haroon was ready to give her up. So what the next time something happens? Is he just going to be like, all right, Alfie, like we're going to strap you to a rocket and fucking shoot you at a space station?
It might take time to rebuild the trust there.
Yeah, but that's the creator. I love it.
Pretty fun.
Not perfect, but
if you're a sci-fi fan and those genre elements get you excited, this movie has just a ton of them to get you excited. So like the balance will definitely work out in the movie's favor.
And there is some real good human scenes. Well, pardon the expression, but like anytime Alfie and Taylor are interacting, it's very heartwarming. It's cute. There's real emotion there. So it's not just like a cold sci-fi movie. There is some emotional depth at play. Maybe not as much as they were hoping for, because some of it does fall flat, but there's just a lot to like in this movie. And there's even some to love, and there's very little to dislike. I cut the movie a lot of slack because it's doing something that's not easy. It's making a relatively big budget sci-fi movie based on nothing, no known IP. And
exactly. When you step back, you got to give it credit for that. They just threw you into a whole world and a story that you hadn't heard before because they wrote it for this. It's not out of a comic book. It's not out of a book or something movie from 20 years ago. They invented it. So you got to be grateful for people inventing fun sci-fi stuff like this.
All right. You want me to catch up with some of the cast, see what they've been up to?
It feels like it's been several months since this movie happened. Something must have changed.
For our boy Gareth, no info about what his next movie will be.
Okay.
But I do always have to shout out Monsters, his first feature film with our boy Scoot, my mainest man, Scoot McNairy.
I know.
That's the first movie I saw Scoot in, and I've been a fan ever since.
Yeah, you turned me on to both Scoot and Gareth by recommending that movie, and I watched it and I dug it.
Yeah, really good. And then a test for this movie to see, because he had almost no money when he made Monsters, and he's like, I'm going to to make a fucking kaiju movie with $2 million.
Uh-huh.
And by God, he did it. So the man knows how to stretch a budget, clearly.
Yeah, that was very impressive. It's certainly, you can see why he bootstrapped his way into Hollywood with that movie.
Yeah, and I feel like this movie got good reviews. It lost money, of course, but it wasn't like a $200 million disaster. I feel like he'll get another shot.
Yeah.
Because he was 3 for 3 before this in terms of not just his movies being well liked, but also making money.
Okay.
Rogue One was a huge hit. We don't know how much of Rogue One is his and how much is Tony Gilroy's, but he still kept the director credit.
Yeah, from what you read, it sounded pretty positive. No one thought that he fucked up that movie or that it should drag him down.
And he launched a pretty sizable cinematic universe with the 2014 Godzilla. Think about all the auxiliary media we've gotten from that, with not just the Kong movies, but the Kong animated show on Netflix and the Monarch show on Paramount Plus and the Kong and Godzilla movies together. And like that IP was dead in the water with American audiences after the 98 Godzilla, and he made it feel legitimate again.
Yeah, you would think that there should be some studio execs around town who were like, we got to give him some props.
John David Washington. What's our man going to do next? He is in post-production on a movie called The Piano Lesson. Do you know who the director is?
No idea.
Also the writer, Malcolm Washington, his brother.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I was alluding to. There is going to be some Washington family hijinks to get into in the theater soon.
That's fun.
I don't know much about the movie, but I'll certainly check it out. I'm a big John David Washington fan so far after Black Klansman. I didn't love Beckett, but I liked him in it. And same with Tenet. Haven't seen Amsterdam yet because I'm waiting to cover it on the podcast. But
yeah, we'll have to get to that one.
So Gemma Chan, she's been super busy. She was in big budget stuff like The Eternals. She was also in Captain Marvel, but playing different characters, which is weird because they're both in the MCU.
Oh.
Yeah, figure that out.
That's a special opportunity.
She was in some smaller movies, Let Them All Talk, Don't Worry, Darling. She's been doing a good amount of voice work. She was in The Boy and the Heron and Raya and the Last Dragon, which my daughter is suddenly obsessed with.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I think she saw my mom and my wife Jamie took my daughter Emily to Disney on Ice. They had a Raya and the Last Dragon set piece that she was apparently quite fond of. So now she watches that movie at least once a day, which is awesome because it's a good movie.
And I'm excited for Boy and the Heron. I haven't got to see that yet, but everyone says Miyazaki still got it.
I'm not shocked. I assume it's going to be awesome. But then her next movie coming out is The Actor, which honestly sounds pretty rad. Listen to the synopsis. When New York actor Paul Cole is beaten and left for dead in 1950s Ohio, he loses his memory and finds himself stranded in a mysterious small town where he struggles to get back home and reclaim what he's lost.
Weird.
That sounds like 100% my shit. I'm getting some El Royale vibes, maybe.
It sounds a little bit Lynchy.
Little Lynchian, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be checking that one out.
Interesting stuff.
We already covered it. Madeleine, Yuna Voyles, only film role to date, nothing else announced. And Ken Watanabe, this was his last film. Unclear what's next for him, but I think he's coming back for Tokyo Vice Season 2.
Oh, okay.
The man's been working nonstop for probably like 30 years. So if he wants to take a year off or so, he's more than entitled.
He's earned it.
Was there anything I forgot to go over that you wanted to bring up?
No, that was a pretty good movie.
Pretty good movie, right?
It's a fun movie to recommend if you know anybody and you're like, oh, you like sci-fi? You got to see this because it shouldn't be missed for anyone who's at all a sci-fi fan.
I could see if you don't buy into the whole sci-fi setting and premise, it might leave you a little cold. But if you're into this stuff at all, it's definitely got something for you. We're doing a big sci-fi extravaganza next week too. Ridley Scott's Napoleon.
Speaking of being left in the cold, like some French soldiers trying to get to Moscow.
Oh, brother.
Ian's
going to start dropping his history.
I don't know. I think that's a thing that happened in history, but I won't know until I see Napoleon, which I've heard is perfectly accurate.
100% accurate to what really went down. I'm just shocked. Ridley Scott's, isn't he like 107? And he's just making these fucking huge epics.
Multiple ones per year, it feels like.
Like he's got to be filming them. Like he leaves Napoleon set and goes to fucking Italy to film House of Gucci. Like he's doing another Alien movie now.
That's right.
He's just producing that Alien movie. He's not directing it, but he is directing stuff. He's doing Gladiator 2.
Yeah. Okay. That's crazy.
There's no way that's going to be good, right?
Maybe he can pull it off.
Let's watch Napoleon first, and then we'll have a better understanding of if Gladiator 2 is going to be any good.
We'll see where Sir Ridley is at this moment. Does he seem like he's still got it in him?
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the pod wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. You can email us any suggestions, feedback, movie recommendations, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Love to hear from you guys. We really appreciate the warm welcome back. So we'll see you next week.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.